Hello there and welcome to a brand new day in the studio. In today's video we're going to develop the drapery on the model's clothing, so the fabric on the model's clothing. So we're going to take it from the basically the underpainting stage where it was basically in two tones, and we're going to develop very simple value gradations, and we're going to study the abstract shapes and the patterns involved in creating the illusion of drapery. So what we have on the palette here today is titanium white, flake white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, cadmium red medium, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, ivory black, and our painting medium is Liquin original. So what we're going to do is mix up a bluish gray value scale. So each day we walk into the studio and we look at the painting afresh, and we want to first of all emphasize the value and build the color. So let's go ahead and just use a little bit of burnt umber. This is going to be very similar to the value scale that I make for the flesh tones in terms of the execution of the paint mixing, but the colors are going to be different. So we're going to start off with ultramarine blue, burnt umber, ivory black. This is going to be our darkest dark. I'm not even sure if we're going to get this dark in the actual painting. So let's go ahead and get into the ivory black, flake white. You know that I like to use flake white in the midtones because I can use more of it without raising the value too much. So adding a little bit more flake white, see how it doesn't raise the value that much, but it creates a nice body to the oil paint. And by body I mean the how much actual paint, the paint pigment to oil ratio is increased. That's what I mean by that. So I'm going to add a little bit of titanium white, and you'll be able to see that? See how much brighter we can get with the titanium white, but it has less of the opacity, or less of the thickness in the paint. So the pigment to oil ratios. So this is going to be very much kind of like a grayscale, right? But now what we're going to do is we're going to get a bluish tint down here. So ultramarine blue, and pretty much with the same brush, just ultramarine blue, titanium white. We want something that's very nice and bluish. Very simple. Just titanium white, what was already on the brush, and the ultramarine blue. And now what we're going to do is put in another shade of blue, but that's a little bit warmer. And this is pretty much going to be the color value range that we're going to stick with for today. Today's not going to be a long day. Today's going to be a day where we look at the question of drapery and the drapery on the model. And you know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but drapery, or the clothing that the model wears, you know, it's one of the things I would probably actually recommend you work from photograph as opposed to working from life, and a good photograph. Now let me clarify why I say that. Traditionally, I think that people used mannequins. They would set up the drapery on a mannequin and use the mannequin so that the model wouldn't have to hold still for the painting of the drapery. Now if I had a mannequin and the clothing set up in the exact place with the lighting and everything, then I would use that. I would prefer to use that. But we work with what we've got. So now this is a bluish but kind of closer to the purpley kind of value family. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a different brush, and we're going to start off with the mid-tone range in the neutral area, so right around here. And before we get started, here's an image of our model Steve, and I'm going to keep a picture of him to the top left corner of your screen so you can refer to it as the painting develops. Just keep in mind though that the camera is at an angle with respect to the painting so that I don't block the painting footage, and so that there isn't such a large glare. So let's go ahead with the mid-range, the mid-value. We're going to look for the halftone. So I'm pretty much okay with this value for the shadow of the shirt. And now we're going to adjust the colors a little bit, but the value is pretty much solid. So we're going to take a look at the halftones now. And we're going to look at the dark light, the most emphatic change in value. So just going right from the value scale on the palette. Drapery is tricky. Drapery is a little bit tricky. You really want to stand back when you're painting drapery. You want to see the simple shape. And I know I say that every day, every single time. I always say that. I always say, look at the simple shape. But with drapery is a very elusive thing. It's a very difficult thing to grasp without the tool of simple shape. And that is, these patterns are very, very much abstract from nature. If you would just look at a close-up image of the drapery, you probably won't know what it is until you stand further back and see it in the context of the surrounding shape. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the other brush and I'm going to start to apply the color change that I want. So I want it to be a little bit more blue. So let's go ahead and put in that blue. See, that blue is too dark. Guess what? That's why we have the value range on the palette. There we go. Very simple. We can move up in value. Now that we're moving up in the value to the value range that we want, we're also going to notice that we don't want it that blue. So we're going to contrast the blue with that warmish color. See that warmish value range that we already mixed up on the palette. Very simple. Now, of course, I still want the value to be a little bit higher. So a little bit of titanium white is a risky decision to make, but I'm going to make it. So again, really want to stand back and squint, and you really want to make sure that you're not losing your delineation between light and shadow. Light and shadow is key. Alright, so now I'm going to start to notice that it's too saturated. That's when I go back to the grays. Bouncing back and forth between these value scales is what's going to help me get the right shape and the right tone. But since we already answered the question of tone, we're really now just going back and forth between these colors to try to get that color relationship. Try to establish that color relationship. And this is made much more simple now with the answer of shape and value already answered. And remember, we already answered those questions in the underpainting. So now I'm going to go back to the other brush, the brush with the halftone value. Remember, the halftone has to be a little bit lighter. But now I'm starting to question the nature of this shape right there. I think that shape is actually in shadow, so we're going to try to push it darker. And there's going to be a little bit of a pocket of value. So let's get a different, no, never mind. Let's just use the same brush. So let's use this light brush, light halftone brush. See that? Now we're starting to introduce the planes. And with the drapery, the planes are really going to be important because they're like almost literally, they're literally planes. See that single brush stroke there? That's indicating a very clean, well, not clean, but it's indicating a pretty well delineated, almost rectangular shape, kind of in the shape that you would think of a standard plane would be in, a picture plane. Super simple, but again, very elusive. So with the drapery, I will try to continue to stand back and to simplify. Simplification is key. Now, if you want to look at someone that was excellent at drapery, I would probably look at Diego Velázquez. Pretty sure that he used the mannequin. Whereas we don't have a mannequin, but we have a photo reference. So one of the things to look out for when working from the photo reference for drapery is, especially in the lights, I'd be careful with the values. So for instance, the photo reference is pretty much blasting. It's blasting the value for this area. And we didn't do that in the underpainting. This isn't straight white. So as long as we don't copy the photo reference, we're in good shape. A little bit darker down here. Very, very simple yet elusive things. You know, I'm trying to bring this experience to you. I know I say this every day. I'm really trying to bring the experience of being here in the studio for you every single day. You know, on some days, artists will walk into the studio and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to take my time today with the drapery. I really want the drapery to look realistic in nature. I really want the drapery to be strong and to be, you know, to look like drapery at a distance. And most of us will give ourselves the entire day. I will certainly give myself the entire painting session for today with the drapery, but of course I'm going to be guiding you through it in a way that's fun. Really want you to feel and to connect with the painting, the process of painting. Now, another thing about drapery is, at least for me, I don't know if it's the same for you, I have this tendency to impose symmetry where there isn't any. So meaning this shape here being the same as this shape here just isn't, it wouldn't happen that often in nature. Almost looks like a green bean, this to this, whereas this is actually a little bit higher up. So making this shape bigger than this shape. And then there's going to be a little bit of a pocket of light right there. One brushstroke at a time, trying to observe each one of these shapes. You know, and the trick is to use minimal brushstrokes to obtain the optimal depth of form. That's the trick. Now we're pushing a little more of a cooler color over here. Nice and simple. Now there's going to be another little pocket of light right up here, just to add a little bit more nuance to that shape. Now you want to look at the movement of the drapery as well. You can think about it as the, I don't know, like the gesture of a model. So for instance, this is a very well-defined swooping line going in this direction, very dynamic line. And I do like the way that the drapery is moving towards the middle of the canvas. Remember, his finger is very close to the middle of the entire canvas, as we talked about in the compositional stage of this painting. Swooping line towards the hand. A little bit more of a lighter shape there. Now let's go ahead, get a different brush, a little tiny brush now, and put in this little pocket of value right there. Now it's all about what this looks like at a distance. You know, I do enjoy that look that certain paintings have, where the drapery is so realistic from a distance, and you approach it and you're like, what? Like how can such a simple thing of brush strokes look so convincing? And that's what today's about. Showing you exactly how to get that in theory, of course. A little more of a light shape over here. So again, just going back and forth on the palette. So this right here is going to be pretty dark. It's going to be a pretty dark, almost in shadow. Maybe this corner right here is in shadow. Perhaps this is, now let's think about this as a form now. So perhaps if that's a shadow, okay, if this is a shadow, then that means that this form, this little overlap, is at such an angle, since the light is at this direction, that this area is almost parallel, if not even more, tucked away from the light source. That kind of three-dimensional thinking, combined with a few little brush strokes in the right direction, so a little pocket of light right there, will give you the illusion of three-dimensionality in this little area of fabric. You know, it's kind of an interesting experience to talk and paint every single day and to really try to get to express your ideas. And sometimes I can't really express them properly, but I will say over time it is getting easier for me. It almost feels more natural for me to paint and talk, of course, while filming, as opposed to my older style, which was a voiceover. But you know, I'm really starting to feel more connected to this process. And I hope you're starting to feel more connected to these videos. You know, each of these paintings that we're going to create, I really want to create more larger paintings like this. You know, maybe one day we'll have our own little gallery where we can all come and see these paintings. These are almost like, this is almost like a movable TV show right in front of us. Isn't that neat? So I'm observing now that I could probably do one of those brush strokes that I was talking about. So a little more, let's say flake white, right into this little mid-range, making sure that we're not using straight up titanium white. Let's try to do that. Let's try to do that brush stroke thing I was talking about. There. Let's see. Maybe, maybe not. You know, you can make a certain area look like a brush stroke, like it was a single brush stroke. There. Now let's go ahead and get back to the darker brush and just soften the transition between that shape. So another interesting little thing here is that even the shadow now is going to have a little bit of nuance. So for instance, an area right around here, which is also, again, kind of about the movement of the drapery going down, over. So right over here, there. So it's getting a little bit darker there because that area of the drapery is now being tucked away. And already this is starting to feel volumetric to me. Meaning like it exists in three-dimensional space. A little darker there. So let's look for those little pockets of dark value. Let's make them bluish. Right there. There's going to be one right there. Now again, we're going to want to relate all of these shapes to one another. So right next to that pocket, there's going to be a bluer shape. That's still in the shadow, so a little bit lighter. Got to be careful though, not to make it too light. So a little bit lighter there. It's almost like making an abstract painting, but we're looking at the direction of each one of these shapes. Whoops, got paint on my thumb. It'll be okay. A little bit darker over here. Again, try to look for the movements. So a little bit lighter and more blue back over here, but you know that's too blue, so let's go to the warmer area. There we go. Maybe that's still too blue, so a little bit more warmth right into that shape. And you know what? I think I drew that a little bit wrong. I think this needs to come out like that a little more. Now very quickly we're going to start to have the illusion of form. Let's get another little halftone. Just a delicate little halftone. Should probably clean the paint off my finger here, or my thumb. Okay. So this plane right here, so this is really going to be a good lesson on planes. This plane right here is literally at a different angle with respect to the light source than this one. See how that value kind of agrees with us? Then of course it's going to be a little more bluish, a little darker bluish, or sorry, lighter bluish next to it. Right about there. Super simple. Now that shape is going to carry over, almost like a little trapezoid Picture that's the shape of the trapezoid going all the way down to about there. Now this is going to be kind of an interesting shape. I think I'm kind of making this too light, or am I? I don't know, but it's okay to go a little bit lighter. Just make sure not to go straight white. You can even use the paper towel if your paper towel is white, just so you can see how much lighter you can go. Yeah, we still have quite a bit we can go, so we should be fine with that. Now back to the darker brush, we're really going to try to delineate this little shape right here. So this goes over here, then tapers down. Gonna get some more warmth for that shape. Goes over pretty much all the way down to here, and this is pointing kind of away from the finger, almost kind of towards it, but further away than, say, these shapes. Then of course it's going to get darker here, but not, not as dark. This is going to be have a little bit of reflected light. And now let's go ahead and get a little more light. Try to get that shape in there. It's also a much sharper edge. Now there's a lot of stuff going on here, so here I'm going to try to simplify even further what I'm seeing. Try to simplify what I'm seeing even further. So I'm going to switch to the darker brush. I may have accidentally switched between brushes. That is, put the dark in the light and the light in the dark in terms of my brushes, but it's okay. Doesn't always have to be perfect. Definitely going to try to simplify what I see here. Now, what helps with simplification here, I'm going to give you a little tip. What helps with simplification is to squint. So to stand back and to squint. A little bit of a darker shape there. And when I'm squinting, all I'm seeing is a little light shape here, or sorry, a dark shape here, dark shape here, and then this starts to taper away from the light. That's what I see when I'm squinting. We really want to get these large forms, and perhaps later, if we want to come back and put in some more of those little elaborate details, we can do that. Now I'm just going to add a little bit more blue to the back corner here. Almost like I'm glazing it, really. Just to cover that. A little more dark over here. Not very much left with that for now. For now, I don't think I'm going to do much more to that shadow. Alright, so now let's go ahead and examine this dark shape here. So I'll tell you what, I think what I'm going to do is get get like a darker mid-tone. So let's add a little bit more ultramarine blue, ivory black, flake white, just to add more consistency to the paint. I'm going to thin it out a little bit with the Liquin Original, a tiny bit more titanium white just to raise the value a little bit. We're kind of recharging this value scale, but we don't want it to be that blue. So we're going to contrast it with the burnt umber. There we go. And now this is the color that I want. So we're going to look at these shapes now. So this is going to create a little bit of a pocket coming over here. And that shape is going to kind of taper down towards here, kind of towards the knuckle a little bit. And now we're going to look at the other shape over here. I think this is a cast shadow. This is a shadow being casted by the book. And since it's a cast shadow, I think it's going to need to get a little darker, even darker. There we go. Right up until that point. It's going to be a little pocket of light right there. So let's go ahead and switch to the lighter brush. A little tiny pocket of light there. And over here is going to be a little bit of dark. Now let's look at the planes. So hold on, let's put this little shape coming over there. Now let's take a look at the planes. So I think that this plane right over here is going to be angling away from the light a little more. So that one's going to be angling away from the light. So is this little shape here. This one's going to be angling closer towards the light, so you tell me what happens. What happens when a shape angles closer to the light? Yep, you guessed it. It's going to get lighter. In our case, it's going to get lighter and a little more blue. You know, and the thing about drapery is that you really have to be faithful to the shapes that you're observing. Drapery is almost like the portrait in a way that you really want to look at all of the shapes and see how they relate to one another. If you get it a little bit wrong, it's okay, but with drapery it's a little more evident when it's not well observed. This plane is going to be angling towards the light a little bit more. You know, and there's still a little more simplification here, so I'm going to soften that edge. I'm going to go ahead and put in this little shadow shape. I think this is a cast shadow being casted almost maybe by the globe. Not entirely sure. But I know that there's a cast shadow there. And now we're going to work our way up here. Standing back and squinting, I see that perhaps I could extend this little shape up here. Paint in a little bit of a half tone over here. Simple little half tone. And then it's going to be lighter around here. If it's lighter around here, is the plane facing towards the light more or away? You tell me. All right. So let's go ahead and look at some more little elaborate shapes. So right over here is going to be a pocket of light, contrasting with that dark. Super simple. Now this plane is facing closer to the light. It's facing the light more than this one. See how we're constantly relating planes? Planes, planes, and more planes. Angling away from the light. A little more there. We can let this kind of meet the beard. It's okay. A little bit darker there. Because that plane is... Why is it darker there? Alright, enough of that. It's darker there because that plane is facing the light a little bit less than, say, this one. But it's facing the light a little bit more than this area, so it's a little bit lighter. See how we keep relating all of these shapes? And I think we're pretty much approaching the end of this. I didn't really use too many of the colors that were on my palette. And as I always mention, well, not always, but as I've mentioned a couple times before, the way I save my paint is just to get the paint off of my palette onto a sheet of glass, and that sheet of glass into a freezer. And it usually keeps it from drying. Unless of course that color is burnt umber or raw umber. Then it'll dry no matter what. I've heard other people put their paints in like water or something. How about that? How about we throw in a question of the day? Question of the day. How do you preserve your paints? How do you keep your oil paints from drying? Be an interesting little conversation to have between all of us. So go ahead, comment down below right now. How do you keep your paints from drying? And I think that's about all I'm going to want to do for the drapery today. So that being said, I really hope that these videos help you out. And as always, it is my hope, my dream, and my ambition to bring the experience of being here in the studio, creating these paintings every single day. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll be back again in another 24 hours. And here's what the painting looks like after today, with the camera as close to front and center as I can possibly get it. Again, I really hope that these videos help you out. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll be back again tomorrow.